right. Can I get a quick show of hands for everyone who is familiar with SB2 or HB2? That's good that many people understand what's going on. So it is SB2, which is currently being debated in the state Senate. In fact, it just literally today successfully came out of committee, which is great news. These are the preeminent property tax reform bills going on in the current legislature. And it's an important change in the dynamic this year because obviously we don't have our friend Joe Strauss obstructing legitimate Republican and conservative reforms. And what's also great about this bill or in these set of reforms is that you have the governor, the lieutenant governor, and the speaker all 100% aligned to support them and get them passed. So what are these bills? They do not provide property tax relief. In other words, there's no actual cuts. But what they do is limit the amount of tax revenue that a local entity can increase your taxes by in any given calendar year to 2.5%. And so at 2.5% is basically a trigger, for potentially a rollback election in the event that they want to raise more tax revenue than that, then they have to go to you, the voter, and you decide if it's okay for them to do it. So you hear all this ridiculous buzzword nonsense about, it's a sacrifice to things like local control, which basically means that local politicians, and I was one, as many of you know, a former city councilman and mayor pro tem, they want to completely retain control over the property tax process, and they want zero state intervention on their ability to continue to spend, borrow, and tax at will. And they are all lining up against it, just like they do every single session. Most notably here in Tarrant County, County Judge Glenn Whitley, who is the worst politician in the state with an R by his name. This is a guy that has attacked conservative legislators. He has campaigned against conservative legislators, and now he is actively waging a war against his own taxpayers. The mayor of Southlake, Laura Hill, formally opposed it last week in a letter to the legislature. She's on the record. It's in the testimony. Most of your city leaders and school district leaders will oppose it for the reasons that I just described. So what do we need you guys to do? A lot of these guys are hiding right now. My own state rep won't take a position. In the meantime, you go on Twitter, and Governor Abbott, every 10 times an hour, is featuring another state legislator who is literally on a video publicly supporting this bill. And it feels pretty good in the Senate right now. That'll pass without a lot of material changes, but look, in the House, you still have a Joe Strauss deep state in terms of the legislators that are there, including my own. And so these people have to be rooted out, which means we all have to do it. So how do we do that? You have to hit their social media pages, and you have to demand that they provide their position on the bill now, not later, now. A great activist in Southlake that probably many of you know, Yvette Diot. She went down and testified last week. She has these great buttons. Yes, there's one right there. Would you show everybody that? 2.5. So her husband Rich has created a Facebook profile with that button, and you can replace your Facebook profile with it. So we'd ask you to do that as well. And then there is a Facebook page that is just starting. I got to find the name of it, so give me a second. Texans for Property Tax Relief and Reform. Please follow that page, share it, circulate it to all your friends. And the last thing you can do is actually show up at the public hearings. So last week, they had the SB2 hearings, super enlightening. You had literally a parade of public officials, elected officials, who opposed the bill they're testifying, on our dime, along with their lobbyists, of course, TML, TASB, TASA. And then you had a huge group of citizens who were there on their own time, including a lot of folks in this room. And the response was overwhelming. Like the committee, if you haven't seen the video, commit yourself to a couple of hours of it because it's extraordinarily compelling because there is just no rational argument against these types of reforms, none. And by the way, before I forget, while every single Northeast Tarrant mayor, most city council people, and of course Whitley, opposed the bill, I'm proud that in my city, where I was a former councilman, mayor pro tem, my mayor, Richard Newton, is one of the few city leaders on the record supporting this reform. And he's been talking to the governor's office as a result. So as always, Colleyville kind of leads the way. So just lastly, and I'll be as brief as possible. So here's why this is important, because the way that we got here is that these local tax entities all basically point the finger at each other and play the blame game. Because usually we know these people, right? We know them all in our community. It's the old thing about how everybody loves their congressman but hates Congress. And so like your state rep will tell you, well, you know, the problem really is, you know, it's the cities or it's the schools who control their own budget and control their own tax rates. The schools will point the finger at TAD. I've literally heard this. I mean, most of you know we ran a school board race last year, and the school board trustees told people that they don't control their taxes, that TAD does. It's absolutely insane. And then everybody blames the state. So this is how they get away with it. They convince every single voter that they're not the problem. And then nothing gets done, nothing happens. And so the great thing about these bills also is, now every tax entity will have to be accountable to you directly, because they're gonna have to then make the argument as to why they need to increase revenue more than 2.5%. And I think most of you in this room clearly understand, we've been getting property tax increases way higher than that. I literally had a Facebook exchange yesterday with a South Lake City councilman who was arguing this point with me, and I literally got his own CAFR data and showed him where they increased their property taxes 9% last year. And I'm like, well, it's no wonder. It's no wonder you don't want a 2.5% trigger for a rollback. So he was trying to play the same game, and they're all going to play this game. They're all going to, this is an important game to watch too, because the new one they're going to do is, this isn't actually property tax relief. So don't you really want relief? Not just slowing the growth. Well, of course we do. But this is a step in the right direction. And it's a bill that every single leader in the state, Republican leader in the state of Texas is behind. And that's why we got to get behind it. Because worst case, you know, they're just not going to be able to raise our taxes arbitrarily 10+% every single year. Not without coming to us for permission. So thank you guys. And please, please, please commit your, not just your state electeds. So your state rep, your state senator, the other people that influence this are your city council people, your mayor, and your school boards. And I think everybody here knows that, you know, school district spending is about 65% of your property tax bill. And they are hiding right now. They do not want to go on the record because the wild majority of them oppose the bills. Thanks.